right? Oh, tugging back, okay. All right, there's some more people coming in, so I guess I'll just slowly start opening up the event. So, hey everyone, welcome to Green Apple. I'm Brendan, I'm a bookseller here. I'm really, really happy and excited to have Minna Dubin here tonight with Jenny True, celebrating the release of her book, Mom Rage, The Everyday Crisis of Modern Motherhood. So thank you for joining us in person and for our friends online. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, and we are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. And we hope you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action and donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization every time you hear a land acknowledgement. So some brief business before we get to the reading. So now is a great time to silence your phones if you haven't already. So do that. Also check out our full event calendar on our website. We have a couple more events coming up this week and next that are going to be really awesome. Right now, the restroom is not available for reasons you will see, and during the event, it will also not be available for obvious reasons. So after, it's free for you to use. And we will have books by both Minna and Jenny available up front at the registers for you to purchase, and they will be signing afterwards as well, right at that back desk area right near the refreshments. All right, and so now I'm just going to introduce the writers tonight. So Jenny True is Jenny Pritchett, a Bay Area writer, editor, and teacher. Her inclusive screed on pregnancy, postpartumness, and parenthood, You Look Tired, an excruciating honest guide to new parenthood, came out during the pandemics, which they do not recommend. It's been translated in Turkish, which they do recommend that. Their debut collection, At or Near the Surface, won the Michael Rubin Book Award. She was the pregnancy and parenting columnist for Romper and a fact checker for Sunset and Dwell, as well as an intern for Mother Jones and Ms. In this current life, after becoming the first full-time copy editor for both Common Sense Media and KQED, she is a West Coast copy editor for Guardian US. All right. And so, Minna Dubin is the author of Mom Rage, the book for why we are all here tonight. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times, Oprah Daily, The Times Sunday Magazine, Salon, Parents, Romper, and elsewhere. She is the recipient of an Artist Enrichment Grant from the Kentucky Foundation for Women. And as a leading feminist voice on Mom Rage, Minna has appeared on MSNBC, Good Morning America, The Tamron Hall Show, BBC Women's Hour, and NPR. She lives in Berkeley, California with her husband, 2 kids, and no pets because enough is enough. All right, let's give a big hand for them and welcome them. Thank you.
Hi, Minna.
Hi, Jenny. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Did you want to start with the reading?
Sure.
We totally planned this ahead of time.
All right, I'm going to start with the reading. I'm going to read a section. It's fun. I do these events, and I get to read a different section every time I do an event, which is really fun. So I'm going to read a section I've never read out loud before. And there is at least one curse word in here. FYI. So this is a section where it's from the chapter Invite Your Rage to Tea, where I talk about going back and trying to access my pre-motherhood rage memories. Because mothers would always tell me, oh, I was never ragey before I became a mother. And I sort of thought that too, and then I was like, maybe that's not true. So this is me attempting to do this. The first time I tried this, I closed my eyes and opened my mouth like I was going to scream. My hands turned into claws, and I stood there in a silent rage pose, letting my mind bring me to the place it associated with that feeling, my childhood home. I lived a happy childhood in a narrow, multi-story row house in West Philadelphia. You could get from one end of the street to the other by hopping over the railing of all the connecting porches. In my rage memory, my mom was downstairs in the kitchen cooking. My father was probably reading a newspaper in the living room or taking a nap on the 3rd floor in my parents' bedroom. I was on the 2nd floor playing a board game in the family room with my older brother, Alex. Alex is one of those people with the supreme confidence nurtured in men. His sureness that he is right, combined with a fat dollop of inflexibility, made him somewhat of a dictator in our house growing up. Whether it was the TV shows we watched or the board games we played, he had the ability to bulldoze past every no until he got his yes. Alex was a fierce competitor at domination board games like Monopoly, Risk, and Axis and Allies. I excelled at word games and memory. Perhaps this is why Alex is a successful business mogul and I record the details of my life. We all have our gifts. In my memory, my brother had convinced me to play one of those domination games, and he wouldn't ease up or let me win. Despite our 3.5-year age difference, Alex played ruthlessly, smiling broadly every time I landed on his properties teeming with hotels. Every match was to the death, and I always died or became bankrupt, which is one and the same in a game about capitalism. When Alex threw down his 10th hotel in Monopoly or surrounded me with his formidable army as I held on for dear life to Yakutsk, my last uncolonized territory in Risk, 7-year-old me was helpless and angry. My demise felt designed. In my memory, Alex had defeated me as usual, and I saw myself leaving the game, screaming in frustration, "I hate you!" Alex just shrugged, palms up. That's how you play the game. Technically, Alex was right. That is how you play the game. Most games, actually, including life, the lived experience, and the board game, that are designed by men for men, in which one player wins because of the subjugation, bankruptcy, or demise of the other players. Risk and Axis and Allies, also designed by white men. Monopoly was modeled after the Landlord's Game, created by Elizabeth McGee. In the Landlord's Game, there were 2 ways to play. The monopolist way, in which the players amass as much money and property as possible and win only when the other players have lost everything. Or the anti-monopolist way, in which all players benefit from another player's success. McGee's double version game was meant as a primer and warning for kids about capitalism. It called attention to the designs already known. A man named Charles Darrow stole McGee's intellectual property and sold it to Parker Brothers with only the monopolist rules. Darrow ended up a millionaire with a royalty agreement. McGee was later paid a mere $500 by Parker Brothers for her patent. Though Darrow and Parker Brothers did not act justly, they technically played by the rules and won at the game of capitalism, which was drafted by white men for more white men to win. Because my brother was older, bigger, and played by the rules, I felt powerless. I walked away raging, but also unsure if I was overreacting. I didn't understand then that this feeling of my experience being denied or illegitimate is a direct result of playing a game with rules that were designed for me to fail. Similarly, mothering today is a no-win game, because the culture's rules of motherhood weren't made by us or for us, despite what the PR team would have us believe. In my next pre-motherhood rage memory, I was sitting on the edge of a queen-size mattress that lay on the floor in the center of the bedroom where I slept with my first live-in boyfriend. I was a senior in college. We shared the apartment with 2 other friends from Jewish summer camp. I was on the phone with the customer service department of my cell phone carrier, arguing over a mistaken $35 charge on my bill. The customer service representative kept telling me the call was made from my phone number. This was in 2002, well before WhatsApp and free international phone calls, before banks would just click a button and reimburse your account if your credit card was stolen. I don't even know anyone in France, I explained. Yes, ma'am, I understand. It says here the call was made at 4:15 a.m. to Grenoble on March 17th. Right, but see how crazy that is? I'm asleep at 4:15. I don't know a single person in all of Europe. I see. I need you to take that charge off. I'm not authorized to do that. Well, send me to someone who is, because I didn't make that call. Another agent, another broken record. I started to feel like I was in a sci-fi movie. When agent number 2 told me he was going to transfer me, I screamed, "Do not transfer me!" Ma'am, nobody is listening to me. My voice broke and tears came. My boyfriend, who was 5 years older, walked in and gently took the phone from me. I acquiesced and made for the door, then turned back to him and shouted loud enough for the customer service representative to hear, "If they don't take that charge off, I'm switching to AT&T." My boyfriend put his hand up. Enough. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching. He spoke to the customer service representative calmly, almost jovially. He chuckled. My boyfriend looked at me and winked. I got this. I stalked out of the room, grateful to escape customer service hell, but more than that, I could not stand to watch my boyfriend's complicity in this "let's just work this out like men" moment. I could not bear to witness my boyfriend step into the rational man role, rescuing me from the hysterical woman role I felt cornered into. I could have stopped it. I could have grabbed the phone and hung up. I could have yelled, "I won't play by your rules," or more likely, "Fuck you." But I'm not sure who I would have been screaming at. The customer service guy who refused to believe me, or my boyfriend who, by helping me in this way, was betraying me. I didn't yell at either of them. Would they have heard me if I had? I was invisible, cordoned off to my ineffectual woman island. I felt powerless, alone, and dismissed, which are some of the prominent, tender feelings that live underneath my rage.
The fact about the Monopoly game, I didn't know that. And that was one of many things that I underlined and like put exclamation points next to. And that made me very angry. So I thought that we would start the Q&A with some audience participation to get everyone enraged. I'm gonna quiz you with a few questions. And in case you haven't, there are a few questions that are answered in Minna's book. And in case you haven't read it yet, nobody wins. When did hysteria stop being considered a legitimate women's psychological condition? Here are your choices. 1940s, 1970s, 1980s.
1980s.
Doesn't that piss you off?
Wow.
All right, number 2. Synaptic pruning is a fine-tuning of the brain that aids new mothers in letting go of information we no longer need, like a character's name in a book, to make room for critical information we need to keep this baby alive. What do assholes call it?
Long pregnancy brain.
They know. All right, last question. The average amount that other rich countries spend on childcare is $14,436 per child. How much does the U.S. spend? Here are your choices.
For 1 year? For how long?
Yeah, 1 year.
Okay, got it.
1 year. I had to check with the source. $500, $5,000, $15,000.
$500.
You know. Are you angry now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Minna. Yeah, there are a lot of like asterisks and exclamation points in my copy of your book. I actually want to read to you a few sentences from your book that really stuck out to me. I think these have been pulled out elsewhere. It's beautiful writing. Pre-motherhood, I was slippery, 1,000 tiny silverfish, a woman, a writer, a friend, an educator, a queer person, a performer, a Philly girl, a Bay Area transplant, a wife, a lefty Jew. with nothing to lose, no property, no fancy job, no kids. I was a flight risk. I could do or say anything. But now that I have children, I can't stray too far, mouth off too much. So I probably underlined and starred that because I related pretty hard. My kid is now 6, and after the postpartum period has sort of faded, but my life isn't any different. Like, we haven't gone back to who I was before. There's this sort of ongoing struggle of identity. And you mentioned in your book, and I do also, this weird phenomenon of people calling you mom. And it's not that I like my kid. Like, I like being a mom. I recognize that is what they call me. But you talk about this identity that subsumes you. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that and about how that your experience of that got sort of folded in to this mom rage.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is part of what's called matrescence, which is the life phase of becoming a mother. And part of it is that our value, after we reproduce, our value becomes doing care work and domestic labor. That's how society sees a mother's value. And so all the things that you were, like, nobody really cares about those things. You know, fathers tend to they get to be who they were, and then they're also a father. But mothers are a mother, and maybe there's like some side things, like she also enjoys running, or whatever. And so I think that is a piece of mom rage for many mothers, maybe not all. But for me, I think it was partially just your life gets completely usurped. And I think to some extent you expect it, but that, like, your life is going to be about child care, but you also don't. Like, you also think you get to stay the same and just have a baby. But it's very difficult to stay the same. And I think that you, like, claw yourself back out of this, like, flattening, this identity flattening that happens to moms. But I don't think that you actually become your old self ever again. I think you might become a new self and a more complicated self again. But yeah, that's part of the process. And it's hard. It's hard, yeah. And the thing about people calling me mom, I mean, I think that happens to a lot of people. I talk about it, like, in the doctor's office or at the playground, or, you know, oh, mom, is this your sippy cup? You know, people don't know what to call you, and suddenly you're not like miss or ma'am or your mom. Like, it's like a familiarity. Like, people have a familiarity with you, a comfort with you that they didn't used to have. There's something that, like, our society is very comfortable with us being mothers.
Yeah, when you just want to say, I'm dangerous. I've done some stuff. I could do it again. I definitely.
I'm risky.
Yeah, but not too risky.
Not too risky.
Not too risky.
Not too risky. I'm totally, like, gonna take care of this child.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have a memory of when my kid was very young, like 6 months old, driving across the Bay Bridge back into San Francisco, and there was this big billboard, and I don't even know what it was advertising, but it was like somebody on a mountain bike. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I can't do that anymore. And I don't bike. But it was just a sense of, like, it's been taken away from me.
I don't bike either.
You still can.
I know, I totally still can. I know. It's really easy to say it. You still can bike, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Like, I know part of my identity when I was, like, before was I did a lot of traveling. I was privileged to be able to travel. And I have not left the country since before this motherfucker was born. It's been like six years. But I also, like, I I don't really want to go without him anymore.
I know. I just got a passport for the first time in over a decade.
Awesome! Congratulations! You can still do it. All right. Also, I wondered if you could maybe expand on that a little, as far as like the mom rage as you define it, because there was another passage that I really connected with, and I'm going to read it back to you in my own handwriting here, that you talked about how mom rage can look, feel, and even sound like boom, but it's really a long, drawn out boom that is completely imperceptible to most ragers, that's us, the ones doing it, until the eventual explosion. So how did you make that leap from understanding that it wasn't just you being angry, that it was related to being a mom? And then also, how did you discover that it's not just you?
Well, those feel like different questions. Like the boom and it actually being a very silent boom before you actually explode. That was from researching rage and learning about the how rage and anger works in your body, and realizing that that rage is building long before we are able to perceive that it's there. So that's that question, that your body is having a physiological response that you may not realize, and part of us not realizing it is that we don't have time because we're busy, and who has time to deal with all the feelings? And part of it is also a lifetime, particularly for women, of learning to push down anger. And so we think of it as, an ugly emotion for women and a shameful emotion. And so we push it down. And so eventually if you push something down long enough, it's going to pop up when you're not hoping that it will pop up. So that's that question. What was the other part?
How do you know that? How do you know you're not alone?
Yeah. How did you realize it wasn't just you?
I realized it when I published the first article on mom rage. And I got this big response from mothers from everywhere. And I was like, oh, this is happening everywhere. I was getting emails from South Africa and Japan and Australia and New Zealand and Canada. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. It was both devastating and relieving and very exciting. And made me feel totally fascinated and curious, what is actually happening here?
Yeah.
And was the spurring of an investigation for 3 years of this book.
Yeah. I was remembering as you were speaking about how helpful this book is. Let me just say, there was another part in it where you were sort of breaking down what it is, and sort of moved into what do we do about this part? And it might have been actually taking your rage to tea, part of this section that stresses engaging with it instead of continuing to repress it, so it's just going to eat you from the inside. And
what a concept.
I mean, it said, when is it that you have, just a simple question, is there any sort of consistency with when your rage seems to appear? And I was like, at the end of the day, what could possibly be, what's the connection there? And where do you do it? And I was like, the living room, only the living room. There's consistency in how it appears. So it's not just, I really feel like your book is not only research into rage and interviews with so many different people and different kinds of people about their experience with it and their diversity of experience with it, but kind of how to deal. It's no simple answers, but it's investigating yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I very much used myself as my subject in this book because I didn't know who else to use. I mean, I interviewed other people, but for this sort of self-investigation, and it also felt the way I felt I had to provide an answer. Because everyone's going to be like, well, what are we supposed to do about this? And I both don't want to write a self-help book, and nor do I want to really read self-help books or parenting books. but felt like I needed to somehow answer that question. And so describing like I'm more comfortable with like being a researcher.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, let me just talk about how I researched my rage. Like that felt like an inroad to self-help, was to be like, well, this is how I thought about my rage. Let me just explain what my thought process was. And that's like my way to do like a little bit of self-help, was to offer the investigation I did on myself.
Yeah. I think that's also very respectful of women and of moms in particular, to not say, oh, this is what you do. Because it's not going to be the same for everyone. And as you mentioned, it just becomes something else on our to-do list. Like,
Exactly.
do the laundry, pick up the kids, deal with my anger. And it just seems exhausting. So I want to ask you about something that you just mentioned about using yourself as a test subject.
Yeah.
That was like so fantastic about this book. Okay, so your relationship with Paul, your husband,
Just to be clear, that was in quotes because everyone in my family has a pseudonym, and that's not my husband's real name.
I realized that we just met. I was, there's so much that you put of yourself personally into the book, which is such a gift, because it's not like a dry, here, I'm not gonna like let you into like my foibles and my personal situation, but like, here's what I'm actually dealing with, here's my family situation, here's what has happened in the past, and here's how I've been dealing with it. And there were some scenarios in there that were so personal. And part of the reason I was curious about that was, I know in writing about my family and my partner and our kid, I've been writing about them for a long time. And it turns out that a lot of people that I know think that I'm like a terrible wife, and that I have a really bad relationship. And they don't understand that like everything that I write about my husband goes by him first. And it makes us laugh. I really think it brings us closer together. And he has veto power. If there's anything ever that he just doesn't want out there, he has that right. And I don't ask any questions. And he doesn't actually use it very often. And then, we talk about some stuff about the kids. But what was the process of writing about actual things that happen in your family and like your relationship with your partner when you were putting this out there for us?
Anything that I felt a little bit questionable about our kids, I would have him read, just to be like, I think this is okay. Is this okay? Like, so I didn't have him read the whole book. He actually just like finished it like 2 weeks ago. On the plane ride to the East Coast tour. But I did have him read the chapter on partners because he features prominently in that chapter. So I did have him read that before it was published and make sure that everything in there was okay with him. I don't know that I gave him like veto power, but we never came against it. Like everything was, he said, I think it goes well for the writing of the book. Like sometimes he'd be like, I think there might be some pieces of the story you're not mentioning, which might be like his side of the story. But he didn't feel like I was like painting things inaccurately, and he gave me permission. He was like, I think it works well for the story.
One of the things that my partner said that made me laugh the hardest was that he thought I should write a book called Menopause, A Man's Perspective.
Oh.
But he was joking. I will say we have a relationship like that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you his name and his phone number afterwards.
I will say that, like, I do sometimes, like, wonder if people think that as well about me, like, that I'm a horrible wife, or, I know people think that based on some, select emails that I get from a horrible mother. But I also feel like I'm actually much more private about the, like, really sweet and tender stuff. Like, there's so much that's not in this book, and most of that is the stuff that's very private for me. And yeah, it's the stuff that's not about the rage. Like, that's what this book is about.
I think that's really kind of the odd thing about writing and publishing a book that's about you. It's always about you. There are choices that are made, and the perception that anyone else coming to it has so much, and what they take from it has so much to do with what they're coming with. Yeah. All right. Something that I really have been wanting to chat with you about is self-care. Because and I thought this also could be another audience participation part.
Okay, great.
So, for anyone who's been in this position, I have a feeling maybe there are a few. What are some of the most infantilizing and effed up things people have suggested that you do to take care of yourself instead of, for example, giving us paid parental leave or subsidized childcare or subsidized diapers? I mean, we could go on and on. I'll start. Take a bubble bath.
Get a massage.
Get a massage. Yes.
My husband said something really funny to me. First time I left the house after our baby was born, I had been to Target so much before the baby was born. He says to me, why don't you come on, do something yourself? Go to Target.
Oh, God. Go to the mall. Go shopping for us. Anybody else?
I go to art classes. That was like the only way I could get a break if I left the house, you know, and like for half a day. Because otherwise, if my husband saw me there, it's just like, oh, I'm gonna have a beer and take a nap, you know.
Oh, God. That sounds like actual self-care.
Yeah.
That sounds like getting away from everybody and doing something for you. We support that.
I would get your nails done.
Get your nails done. Also, I like yoga as much as the next person. But like, when you're postpartum, by the way, prenatal yoga, it's total bullshit. They're like, go to prenatal yoga and it'll help with the pain of childbirth. And they make you do this thing where you squat. Did you do this?
For the record, I loved prenatal yoga.
Okay, fair. Did it help with the pain of childbirth?
Probably not.
Okay. My experience was they made you squat. Wait, actually, do you remember this? But they made you squat on the balls of your feet and just kind of like wait until it hurt real bad, but it's not going to break anything, so that you are somehow doing something to your brain that will help you withstand the pain of a contraction.
No.
Oh my God.
You
Yoga
went
teacher.
to a sadist yoga teacher.
I sure did. Yoga teacher never had a baby.
Oh.
And by the way, didn't help. Didn't help. But it was nice to be around other people. Anyway, yoga. Everybody suggests yoga. I actually love yoga. I do yoga at home. I love going to classes. I miss going to classes. However, when you're postpartum, to go to yoga, you need somebody to take care of the kid or kids. You need transportation. You need money, because that shit costs a lot of money if you're going to go to a class. You need clean clothes. You need self-confidence.
This is also true, minus the money, for mental health treatment if you happen to get, diagnosed with postpartum depression or anxiety, and they're like, you should go see a therapist. And that was one of the problems one of the moms in the book had, where she couldn't go because she had nobody to watch the baby, and the baby carriage thing was the infant seats were so heavy, and she couldn't lift it by herself, and it was too much, and parking over there was hard, and the bus was too much, and
yeah. She just wasn't taking care of herself.
No.
It's probably her fault.
She needed more self-care.
We're going out to dinner with the whole family.
Oh God.
Oh, God!
I'll take care of the baby, don't worry.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
No.
It doesn't work. It's funny, my last question for that section was going to be, why is the suggestion to take care of yourself so fucked up? But I think we kind of covered that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. One of the things before we go to the Q&A that I wanted to ask you about was actually the writing process, because we had chatted a bit about the fact that like books don't just happen. So there was history before this book appeared. So I wondered if you could chat, for the writers among us, if you could chat a little bit about how you, Minna Dubin, got to this point. So what is your, like, who are you? Who are you to write this book?
I'm nobody. We were talking about this, and I have a background of writing about identity issues, and so the essays, which were all memoir that I used to write, were about the ways that power identities affected relationships, so race and class and gender and sexuality. So I've always sort of been like peeking inside what's actually happening underneath that's affecting us all, and I kind of feel like this book is just the same thing, of like looking at how power and the like societal setup is affecting our experience of motherhood. Like I'm really doing the same thing I've always been doing, I just have sort of a different lens to it. And then with the interviewing, for many years, I worked in San Francisco with Writers Corps, which was a program of the San Francisco Arts Commission that put, hi. Oh my God, I have my Hilltop crew here. Oh my God. So I worked at Hilltop, which was a school for pregnant and parenting teens. That's amazing. That I like loved. And with them, and I also worked at the library in San Francisco, the main library, and before that, I worked with pregnant teens in Kentucky. And so like for many years, I was working with teens, getting them to tell their personal memoir stories of their lives, and often their stories were hard stories. And my job was to help them express themselves and tell the story in the way that was the most engaging for the audience. And so with, all of the interviews I did in this book of mothers, really I was just doing the same work. I was like getting the stories that the mothers needed to tell out, and then I didn't have to help them write it, I just got to write it. I used their quotes, but I was really writing it the way I wanted it writing. So anyway, so that's my background, and then I was, publishing work for a long time, but it just so happened that this one essay about mom rage is the one that caught fire and got me the book deal, but I have not been a mom rage scholar or something.
Well, and you mentioned that writing this book wasn't even your idea.
No, it was not my idea. I do feel like it is like my baby at this point. Like it really does feel like mine, but I was approached by an agent who was like, you need to write this book. And I was like, no. I have this other book about motherhood that you need to publish. And she was like, no. She was like, that's just about regular motherhood. You need to write about mom rage and you're the one to do it. And I sort of like hemmed and hawed for a while and talked to Paul and, went around and figured out whether I could write this book, and definitely didn't want to write a memoir about this that was completely memoir, because I was just like, I don't have enough to say about my story. Like I have this whole other mothering life that has nothing to do with rage. Rage is like this sliver of my mother life. So, so I got the other mothers.
Yeah. And that's actually something I really appreciate about this book too, is that there are a diversity of experiences represented in it, and you're upfront at the very beginning, like a methodology about who you were speaking with, and I think that makes it accessible to so many different kinds of people who are experiencing this. And I like Minna's book a lot, and you should buy it. I think we should do Q&A.
Okay.
Questions from the audience, comments from the audience. Viola?
I was remembering, I have a little tidbit I want to share, which is that I remember in the early days of being a mom, I would go out, maybe I'd go out with my husband, and like I would always get the question, where are the kids? Who's taking care of the kids? He would never get that question. And especially if I was out on my own. And it just drove me crazy. Like, yeah, anyway.
Right.
But I'm also curious to know, like, what are the things that are helping you or have helped you kind of reclaim your identity other than being a mother since you've had children, for both of you?
Yeah. I would say one of them is is the work. One of them is the writing. I really stopped writing for a couple of years after I first had children. It felt like it just took everything. Like it took all of my, not just my time, but like my brain. It was all I could do was to like take care of my kid. And I just like, I think that mothering is a very creative act. And I think that like as a writer, I just like had no creative energy left somehow. And so getting into writing, like when I first started a writing project when my son was like, I think 2, maybe 3, I think 2, I really started writing again. And I felt like that project was like me clawing my way back to myself. And then I think the other one is, you know, we don't have, except for babysitters, like my partner and I are not able to like go away for a week or like anything like that. We don't have like that kind of setup. So we go out separately a lot and we do it pretty regularly, and we have gotten really good at it. And that has been really useful. Like I feel like I go out more than almost every mom I know. And I think that has been really beautiful and good for me.
Love that.
Yeah.
I'm still working on it. I'm not really sure. I think that for me, travel was a big part of it, and traveling on my own, as I mentioned before. And not only is that not really possible, it's not really something I even want to do anymore, because I want my kid to like come see the world with me. So that's kind of odd, because that feels like a loss, but it also is true that I'm not pursuing it. But I will say that the sort of like the postpartum period, which Minna writes about in her book as being a real time of like neurological change, that I think for me went until my kid was about 3. And then I actually started to feel a little bit more the way I did in my own brain before I got pregnant. So I think there also was something that happened with having a kid where I was like, I have been worrying about nonsense for like 40 years because I had my kid when I was 40, and I was like, I don't give an F about so much. So there was a little bit of like self-confidence that came with it. And I think that helped me connect back to the person I like the most, who could make jokes and just like not worry too much about curse words. It's all about curse words. But it's a good question. I think you probably feel the same way. I don't know. I think it's kind of ongoing because you really were somebody before. And for anybody who had kids a little bit later, you were that way for a long time beforehand.
And I'll also say, as the mom of a kid with neurodivergent diagnoses, I think that some of it, like some of the like clawing my way back to myself has all and like helping with the rage has also just been like getting him settled and supported in like all the ways. Like I think that takes many years to like realize that like the kid needs to get diagnosed in the first place, and like there's just like it's a very long process and there's no guidebook for that. And so I think that like it took 5 years, and I feel like we're like at a place where like everyone is much more relaxed about all of it, and so that helps too.
Good question.
Yeah.
Other questions about mom rage, momming, writing a book, finding an agent. Well, actually, you don't have to ask that, but you could try.
Can you speak a little bit about the process of writing a book versus going on the bookstore, and any mom rage surprise you like throughout? Like both of those?
You mean did my mom rage surprise me on the book tour?
I don't know more on book tour writing or any and like I don't know, just how were those, because they're very different.
Yeah. I mean, I think the book tour has been amazing. I actually was just talking to someone today that like I can't imagine. I was thinking about all of the writers who published books during the pandemic, and like, sorry.
It's okay.
I feel like the book tour is like this amazing sense of closure that like very validating to be able to like talk about it and get feedback and like see eyes and like you just like, yeah. So I think the book tour has been really important in that way, and like having some sort of feedback and closure on like having done this big thing that I worked on for a few years. I wouldn't say that I experienced any mom rage on the tour. Actually, it has been really beautiful and like really amazing to have my family there, and what has been like weird and interesting. Like there have been many events that I've had my kids at, and I don't think I had the forethought that like having my kids there means that I'm going to be publicly mothering, that like people are watching my mothering in this way. Like in one of the events in Berkeley, my son raised his hand and asked a question, and it was sort of a hard question. Like I kind of already answered the question, and I like wasn't exactly sure, and I sort of thought about it, and I was like, that's a great question. As I'm like thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And like the crowd kind of like a little Twitter kind of went through the crowd, and it felt like approval, you know, of me being like, that's a great question. Like I felt it also in another event where my daughter spoke. Yeah, so that's sort of been interesting. Just like experience, it's like meta that it's happening, but also really beautiful that they're there and that they're like seeing me and that they feel like bold enough to be able to raise their hand and say something has been like made me feel really good, and I think made them feel good. Yeah.
I really like what you said about the book tour being closure, actually. I love your perception of that, because in like the marketing side of it, it's like the launch. That's where things get started for that. But really for the writer, like you're done. Like if you've been working on it and thinking about it possibly for years by that point.
Yeah.
So to go around and to be done with it, like no more edits, the book is there in your hands, to be able to enjoy that and to just like interact with people about something that you're really passionate about and that's important to you.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing. This is a lovely thing.
It is. Like, I'm doing interviews all the time, and that doesn't feel like closure. But when I'm at a book event and I sign it, you know, it's like, done. Signature. Yeah, there's like closure.
I love that. Questions for Minna?
I have a question. So, I know you're at the end of your book tour. And I'm just curious, from all of the book tours you've been in, give us a question that really sort of surprised you, because I know that you've had a sense of a lot of hard questions. For example, tell us about dad rage, but any that really surprised you and that were hard for you to answer.
Yeah, I had one in New Jersey. I think it might have been the last question, and this woman said, so I have mom rage. And I had mom rage today, and then I came here, and my husband is not going to read this book. And he's not going to read the appendix in the back that's written for him, and he's not going to read the partner chapter. What is one thing I can do today?
Oh, God. No pressure.
And right there in the question, right, what can I do? That's tough.
Right, and that's why I knew I needed to do like this like self-helpy sort of thing, because I knew that was the question. Like people want, like, there's despair in mom rage. Like I know that. And that was a really hard question, but I think I answered it pretty well.
How did you have? Of course you have to share.
Right. I said to her, you should tell your husband that 89 tickets were sold to this event, and that it was sold out, and because this is not a you thing, and that is how many people just in the town of South Orange, New Jersey. Is that your town? My town. That is how many moms like felt bold enough to even come to this event from South Orange, New Jersey, and that you have ideas from your own and from this book for how he can help support you if and when he's ready. I just left it that.
Can I just tell you that right before I came to this event, I was on a meeting with colleagues, and I had shared this event with them in case they wanted to zoom in. What's up? And a colleague, I had said, yeah, I'll send you. He was like, I love this. He's a new dad. Oh, he's the cutest little girl. And he asked, is this a book that I should get to read to support my partner? And I said, yes, I will send you a copy of it. And I sort of immediately, he was saying, well, I try to do what I can. Like, I watched the breast pump parts, and I was like, that's a good job. It's like 10 times a day. That's wonderful. I said, emotional support is very, very important. And then he shared with me that he had been watching the breast pump parts, but then eventually he told his partner, I gotta get my sleep because I gotta watch these things every 2 hours. And I was like, oh, you gotta get your sleep. I'm looking at the camera just in case he's watching. It's a journey, as they say. But I think that's a really good question because we read these books for community and validation. And that ultimately is it. Like the change it has to be a group change. Like dads, men have got to come to the table and provide support.
That's right.
Yeah. That's all I have to say about that.
Agree.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, like, is there anything that is missing from the book or like that you felt like you would want to put in but for whatever reasons is not there?
I don't think I want to put it in, but I will say that I think like the elephant in the room in this book is sex. And that was like a personal choice to leave that out. But I think I'm saving it for the next one. Yeah.
Good answer.
So I'd love to hear you talk about how you navigate, if this is part of your experience, the vulnerability hangover that I imagine comes from revealing so much about yourself to such a wide audience.
I don't know if I have a vulnerability hangover exactly.
She's so cool.
So we have to remember, right, that I have been writing incredibly vulnerable stories and reading them on stages and publishing them. Like, the essay that spurred this book in the New York Times was like the largest platform for my vulnerability. That essay was absolutely terrifying, way more than this book, because everyone has can get on the internet, whereas like someone has to buy the book. Like, I just feel like so many less people are gonna buy the book. So I think that like that almost was like a trial run of like real vulnerability, and that was so scary. And the feedback that I got was so positive, except for like, of course I'm always going to get these emails every once in a while from someone who's being really mean. So I don't know. I feel like at this point, this book feels like a work of art in a way. Like, it's my story, it's my family, but it feels so much bigger than me. Like, this book doesn't even though there's memoir in the book, it's not my memoir exactly. Like, that it doesn't, I don't know. I feel so much ownership over what I'm doing in this book, and so clear that this book needs to be in the world and that people need this book, that I don't think I have quite like as much insecurity as I had with that New York Times piece. So I don't have as much vulnerability hangover.
Do you remember what the process was like of coping with that?
I mean, I like scrubbed my family from the internet. I paid some deleteme.com.
Okay.
It was really scary, and I felt like I was like buzzing under my skin for like a month from like all of the like feedback. It was like very frightening and wonderful and all the things. Yeah. With the wrap up.
So I've been reading, but I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know if you've covered this. And this is kind of a difficult question, but so my ex and I, we used to joke whenever one of us would like yell or snap or whatever that we gotta put another dollar in the therapy jar. I'm wondering what, if anything, you've done to support your relationship with your kids to improve it as you've been growing and healing this for yourself. How you're also having to like grow and support that relationship with them.
Around mom rage, you mean? Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as a person who's like writing a book on the subject, it is definitely like a regular topic of conversation in my home. And I think that that is one of the things that is supporting the family around it. I also have a lot less mom rage than I once had, so that helps too. I think we just talk about it a lot more. And all of us in my house, and I don't actually know because, family is so like, I don't know, amorphous. I'm like, did I model this? Did we all do it together? Like, I think we're all much better about being like, I need to take a break. Like, all of us do that at this point. Like, because I think we're a house of really big personalities. And so all of us are actually really good about taking breaks and then coming back when we're ready. And that feels really good. And like a new thing in the last 2 years of us all being able to do that. And I think we've also gotten really good at apology, which is an important skill, and I think is one of the things that that I found in my interviewing was the difference between the moms who had moms themselves who raged, between how they felt about their parents, or the moms who acknowledged it and the moms who didn't. I think we're going to wrap up. Yeah, thank you.
Let's give another big hand of applause to these two. Congrats. Great conversation. So if you haven't already, please purchase your copy of Mom Rage at the cashiers, and just know that when you support Green Apple Books, you support not only independent booksellers, but writers like these two over here who so need the support, and you get a book. So do that and enjoy the drinks, and thank you so much for coming out, and thank you again. It was really great.
And when I sign your book, then it adds to my sense of closure.
No pressure.
No rush.